"Now, Emil," said his mother, "get ready. Your clothes are on your bed. Get dressed, and then we'll have our dinner." "Yes, mother." "Wait a minute. Have I forgotten anything? Your other clothes are in your case. There's some food for your journey. These flowers are for your aunt. I'll give you the money for your grandmother after dinner. No, that's all, I think." Emil left the room, and Mrs. Fisher turned to her neighbour, Mrs. Martin. "My son's going to the city for 2 or 3 weeks. At first, he didn't want to go. But what can he do here while his school's closed? My sisters asked us again and again to visit her. I can't go, because I have so much work. Emil's never travelled alone before, but he's old enough now. He'll be all right. His grandmother's going to meet him at the station." "I think he'll enjoy the city," said Mrs. Martin. "All boys like it. There are so many things to see. I must go now, Mrs. Fisher. Goodbye." Emil came back into the room and sat down at the table. His hair was tidy, and he was wearing his best jacket. While he ate, he watched his mother. "I mustn't eat too much," he thought. "She won't like it when I'm going away for the first time." But his mother was thinking about other things. "Don't forget to write to me when you arrive," she said. "All right. Give my love to your aunt and your grandmother and your cousin Polly. Look after yourself, and be good. I don't want anyone to say that you're not a polite boy." "I promise." After dinner, Emil's mother went to the sitting room. There was a tin box on one of the shelves. She took out some money and came back to the table. "Here's £70, she said. 5 £10 notes and 4 £5 notes. Give your grandmother £60. I couldn't send the money to her before, but I've worked hard and I've saved it for her. The other £10 is for you. Your return journey will cost about £3. Use the other £7 when you go out. I'll put the money in this little bag. Now don't lose it. Where will you put it?" Emil thought for a minute. Then he put the bag into the pocket inside his jacket. "It'll be safe there," he said. His mother looked serious. "You mustn't tell anyone on the train about the money." "Of course not," said Emil. Some people think that £70 is not a large amount of money. But it was a lot of money to Emil and his mother. Emil's father was dead, so his mother worked hard all day. She paid for their food and clothes, and for her son's books and his school. Emil realized that his mother worked hard, so he really tried to do well in class. She was always pleased when he got a good report from his teacher at the end of the year. "Let's go now," said Mrs. Fisher. "You mustn't miss the train. If the bus comes along, we'll take it." The country bus was very old and slow. Emil and his friends wanted modern buses in Newton, but other people in the town liked their old bus. They liked the driver, too. He always stopped at your house for you. You called out, and the driver stopped, but it was often quicker to walk. The bus came, and Emil and his mother got on. They got off at the square in front of the station. Then they heard a deep voice behind them. "Where are you going?" It was Newton's chief of police. Emil's mother said, "My son's going to visit his grandmother for 2 or 3 weeks." Emil felt silly. He was remembering something. In the centre of the station square, there was a statue of a very famous judge. One day, after school, Emil and his friends climbed up and put an old cap on the statue's head. Then Emil began to paint its nose red. Suddenly the chief of police walked into the square. "Oh no, he saw me," thought Emil, as he and his friends ran away. Now, a week later, Emil waited for the policeman to say, "Emil Fisher, come with me. You are going to prison." But the policeman didn't say anything as Emil carried his case into the station. Perhaps he was waiting until Emil came back from the city. Mrs. Fisher bought a ticket for Emil. They only had to wait a few minutes for the train. "Don't leave anything on the train, and don't sit on the flowers. Someone will lift your case up for you. Don't forget to say please." "I can lift the case up," said Emil. "I'm not a baby." "All right." His mother was looking serious again. "You must get out at the right station in the city," she said. "It's the East Station, not the West Station. Your grandmother will be by the ticket office." "I'll find her, Mother." "Don't throw paper on the floor of the carriage when you eat your food, and don't lose the money." Emil opened his jacket and felt in his pocket. "Don't worry," he said. "It's safe." The train came into the station. Emil kissed his mother and climbed into a carriage with his case. His mother gave him the flowers and food. "Is there a seat for you?" she asked. "Yes," said Emil. "Be good and write to me." "You must write to me, too." "Of course. Now, be nice to your cousin Polly." The carriage doors were shut, and the train moved slowly out of the station. Mrs. Fisher waved her hand for a long time. Then she turned round and went home. She felt sad, but she only cried for a short time. She had to do her work. Chapter 2. The Thief. Emil took off his school cap and said, "Good afternoon," to the other people in the carriage. He sat opposite a fat lady. She was only wearing one shoe, because her left shoe hurt her foot. She was sitting beside a man with a big nose. "Boys are not usually so polite," she said to the man. As she talked, she moved her painful foot up and down. Emil put his hand in his pocket. He wasn't happy until he felt the little bag. He looked at the other people in the carriage. They didn't look like thieves. There was another woman sitting to the right of the man with the big nose. She was sewing, making a cap for a baby. At the window, next to Emil, a man with a black hat was reading a newspaper. Suddenly, the man put down his paper and took some sweets from his pocket. "Would you like one?" he asked Emil. "Thank you very much," said Emil, taking one of the sweets. "My name's Emil Fisher," he said. The other people in the carriage smiled in a friendly way. The man lifted his hat and said, "My name's Green." Then the fat lady asked Emil, "Does Mr. Smith still own the cloth shop in Newton?" "Oh, yes," said Emil. "Do you know him?" "Yes. I'm Mrs. James from Greenfield. I hope he's well. Can you tell him that?" "Yes, of course," replied Emil. "Are you going to the city?" Mr. Green asked Emil. "Yes. My grandmother's meeting me at the East Station ticket office." He felt in his pocket. The paper money in the bag made a little noise. It was still there. "Do you know the city?" "No." "Well, it will surprise you. Some of the houses there are 600 meters high. They tie the roofs to the sky. Then the houses don't move in the wind. And what do you do if you want to get to another part of the city quickly? Do you know?" "No," Emil answered, thinking, "This is a strange man." "You're put in a box at the post office, and then you travel by post. And if you have no money, you can get £50 from a bank. But you have to leave your head there." "Is your head at the bank?" the man with the big nose said. "Stop telling the boys stupid stories." The two men began to shout. Fat Mrs. James stopped moving her foot, and the other woman stopped sewing. Emil was happy, because the strange man couldn't talk to him now. He took out his food and began to eat his bread and butter. Then the train stopped at a big station. The two ladies and the man with the big nose got out. Mrs. James was almost too late, because she couldn't get her shoe on. "Tell Mr. Smith what I said," she called to Emil as she left the train. Now, Emil and the man with the black hat were alone. Emil wasn't very pleased about this. He didn't want to be with a strange man who gave away sweets, a man who told silly stories. Emil wanted to feel the money again, but not in front of the other man. Then the train started again. Emil went to the washroom at the end of the carriage. He took the little bag out of his pocket and counted the money. It was still there, but how could he make it safer? Then he remembered. There was a pin in his jacket. He took out the pin and pushed it through the bag, the paper money, and the cloth of his inside pocket. The money was safe now. Emil went back to the carriage. Mr. Green was asleep. Emil was glad. Now he didn't have to talk to him. He looked out of the window. He enjoyed watching the trees, the fields, and the houses. Mr. Green continued sleeping. Sometimes he made little noises. Emil watched him. Why did he always keep his hat on? Emil noticed his long face and thin ears. Suddenly, Emil jumped with surprise. "I nearly went to sleep. I mustn't do that," he told himself. He didn't like being alone with Mr. Green. Emil wanted more people in the carriage, but nobody came. He kicked his foot to stay awake. He sometimes did this at school in history lessons. For a short time, this helped him. He thought about his cousin, Polly. What did she look like now? It was 2 years since he last saw her. He couldn't remember her face very well. Some minutes later, he nearly fell off his seat. "Have I been asleep?" he thought. He kicked his foot again. Then he counted the flies on the window. He counted them from the bottom to the top. He counted them from the top to the bottom. And then he counted them again. First, there were 24. Then there were 23. Why does the number change? Emil asked himself. Then he fell asleep. When Emil woke up, he was lying on the floor of the carriage. The train was moving. He remembered his dream. It was a bad dream. The policeman from Newton was running after him. He caught him and took him to the stone judge. The judge was alive and said, "Emil Fischer, you painted my nose, so you must go to prison." Slowly, Emil began to remember. Of course, he was going to the city. Did he fall asleep, like the man in the black hat? But the man wasn't there. Emil was alone in the carriage. He sat up. His knees were shaking. He got up from the floor. His clothes were dirty, so he cleaned them quickly with his hands. Then he felt in his inside pocket. The money wasn't there. Emil felt a sharp pain and pulled his hand from his pocket. There was blood on his finger from the pin, but there was no little bag there. Emil began to cry. Of course, he was not crying about the blood. He was crying about the money. His mother worked so hard, and now there was no money for his grandmother or for his visit to the city. I've been careless, and a thief has stolen my money. Now what can I do? He thought. How can I get off the train and say to my grandmother, "Here I am, but I have no money for you, and you must give me the money for my ticket back to Newton. I can't stay in the city. I can't go home again." There was an alarm above the window at one end of the carriage. Emil thought, if I ring the alarm, the train will stop. a railway guard will come to the carriage. He'll ask, "What's happened? What's the matter?" And I'll say, "Someone's stolen my money." "Why didn't you look after it?" he'll answer. "What's your name? Where do you live? You stopped the train. Now your family will have to pay £25. In fast trains, there is a corridor that you can walk along. It takes you to the place where the guard sits. Then you can report a crime. But Emil was in a slow train. There is no corridor on slow trains. You must wait until the train stops at the next station. What's the time? Emil thought. The train began to pass large houses with bright gardens and tall buildings with dirty windows. The train was moving more slowly now. Emil knew what to do. At the next station, I must call the railway guard and tell him everything. The railway company will tell the police. But then I'll have problems with the police, he thought, remembering his dream. They'll ask the Newton police about me. He imagined the Newton police chief officer's report. Emil Fisher of Newton is not a good boy. He paints the noses of statues. I do not believe that his money was stolen. Perhaps he was careless and lost it, but he probably hid it because he wanted to use it for himself. Emil Fisher is the thief. We must put him in prison. Emil thought about the report and was afraid. No, he couldn't tell the police. He took his case down and put on his cap. Then he put the pin back in his jacket and got ready. The train stopped. Emil looked out of the window and saw a sign on a wall. It said, "West Station." The doors were opened and people got out of the carriages. Friends were waiting to meet them. Suddenly, he saw a black hat in the crowd. It was some meters away. Was it the thief? Perhaps he stole Emil's money, but didn't leave the train. Perhaps he just moved to another carriage while the train was at one of the stations. Emil got out quickly. Then he remembered the flowers. He put down his case and jumped back into the carriage. He got out again with the flowers and picked up his case. Then he ran as fast as he could towards the gate. Where was the black hat? There it was. Or was it a different hat? Emil's case was heavy. He wanted to put it down and leave it. But someone will steal it, he thought. At last, he got through the crowd. He was now closer to the black hat. Was it the thief? No. There was another one. No, that man was too short. Emil ran in and out of the crowd. There! There was Mr. Green, the thief. He was passing through the gate, and he seemed to be in a great hurry. "I'll get you," thought Emil angrily. He gave his ticket to the railway man, put his case in his other hand, and with the flowers under his right arm, ran after the black hat. "It's now or never," he thought. Chapter 3. Emil goes after the thief. Emil wanted to run after the man and shout, "Give me my money!" But, he thought, the man won't say, "Of course, dear boy, here it is. I promise that I'll never steal again." No, now he could only watch the man. A very fat lady was walking in front of Emil. He hid behind her and followed the thief out of the station. If I ask that lady for help, Emil thought, she probably won't believe me. The man walked into the station square. He crossed the road.